Most people think being authentic means being raw. The top 1% know the truth. Real authenticity isn't about being unfiltered. It's about being intentional. It's about knowing exactly who you are and having the courage to show up as that person every single time. That's not a personality trait, that's a skill. And today, we're going to break it down.
Now available. Awakening I Am, Internal Awareness in an AI Age audiobook, and our Victory Builders platform, which integrated system for founders who execute, is open. Links in the description. Authenticity is a word that is often used, but sometimes can be misunderstood. People can be mean and be like, well, that's just who I am. I'm being authentic to who I am. and they use that as a crutch. Or there's various ways that we really use the term or the phrase or the excuse, the crutch. Well, I'm being authentic. But when we talk about authenticity and we start to put adjectives, true authenticity, or tap it into your true, what I like to call I am, it moves past attitude. That can be a part of it. It can be an appeal to the way that we dress. It comes across that way, right? It moves beyond labels. I can be a doctor and still identify as just because I'm doing it don't mean that that's what I'm really passionate about. True authenticity is usually connected to something that's immaterial that you can't touch. And if you're in a area of your life where you have had a level of success and then you may get into your mid-age or another level of life where you really begin to identify who you want to end your twilight in, or say, I never really got an opportunity to do this, but this is who I am truly. I'm disconnected. I'm making money here, but I'm not really living true to my true identity. That can be an impasse, right? Michael Jordan tried it, right? He never really lived out the fantasy of playing baseball, and he was able to go and live that through and then really see, okay, yes, that's maybe who I am, but the fabric of who I am is really this basketball thing. So he picks it back up and he excels. But if he never really would have embraced that, it would have always been something that he said, well, was I really as good as I thought? And then it would be a hanging chad there. Today's conversation is about not just being authentic, but embracing your true authentic self and how that can leverage into a greater opportunity in every area of your life. My name is NaRon Tillman. This is another episode of Walking Victory, where we have conversations and sit you at the feet of the masters. And today's master is Dr. Alena. We're going to talk about, as you may have guessed, what it means to be authentic. How are you?
I'm great. Good to be here with you and dive into this great topic.
Yes, but because we hear that word thrown around so much, and I didn't use a doctor reference because you're a doctor, but being that you are, and that's some a label that you have. What does it mean when we don't really identify? We're using the term authentic or authenticity, but we don't really identify what true authenticity means.
That's a great question. And I feel that a lot of the people don't understand what the authentic self is because of what you pointed out earlier, that we can hide behind being authentic and use anger, right? Or all these what we deem in today's society negative attributes. I hear people say, well, I'm just an anxious person, for example, or I'm just not good in relationships,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
so they truly believe, especially in an earlier part of life, because you also mentioned that when we get to our midlife time, we start to realize that something's not adding up. So they really identify with those labels. I am this. I have always been like this. And they feel that because they've always been like this, it must be their authentic self. The way I look at it is that we all come into this world with our unique gifts and abilities. And those get stifled throughout our childhood, those early years of conditioning, because it's for a number of reasons. We can dive into that a little bit later. And so as children, we start to adapt to our environment, and we start to acquire these, what I call, false personas. And it's all beneficial when it's happening because it helps us survive. It helps us feel accepted and loved. But later in life, when we go through our first Saturn return, which is around the age of 28 and 30, and I call it that, the maturation, entering real adulthood. And then later, when we are around 40, and the Uranus opposition comes into our life, and we are faced with having to look at what has worked for us, or what we believed worked for us and no longer work for us, then those are the times we start to question whether that conditioning pattern, that identity we took on, is really aligned with our true self, and how we can dismantle that so we can actually get closer to our true self.
I wanna land on what shapes our worldview. There was the show show when I was coming up. Well, I was already an adult, but it was called Mean Girls, and they really captured how this group of girls were like running to school, and they were not very kind to those who didn't meet the criteria that they set. They didn't dress a certain way. They didn't style themselves in a certain manner, and all of these little things that we hold, right? And at that time, they held the card, right? So you can be a part of the group, but you have to fit this criteria. And that mean girl stigma carried over later on, and that was the whole theme of the movie. But it was something that they held like a chink of armor, right? That I was a part of this mean girl group, and then it plays out. So now, because these are rehearsed loops that we rehearse in our mind, and we start to create these patterns, we think as we get older that it's cool to now create a new mean girl group in the workplace or in the community, and we start to segment. When, in that instance, when does reality set in for an adult who may be stuck in their adolescent livelihood, that this is not who I am authentically? And how do you help people to unpack if they come into you and they're sitting on the couch saying, well, this is what we have always did. We've been doing it this way since the 90s. Right? How much work is it to unravel that neural pathway that has been totally etched into the personality of the person?
Yeah, another great question. And the fact that people come and look for someone like myself or someone else that can help them unravel these patterns is because they came to the realization that it's no longer working for them. It's creating some sort of a friction in life. Maybe it's a successful business career that brought success as we know it in Western world, right? Like title and money, security. But it's bringing this lack of fulfillment, or it's even creating friction in intimate relationships because people are disconnected from those two words, kind of get disconnected. Or maybe it's even a health crisis, right? Like, so there's something that stops working, that used to work, that we could manage, and it becomes very obvious that stops working. And so I found in years of work, because my focus is on helping people work at the subconscious level where these patterns are formed, because many of these patterns are formed when we children, and they come through the nervous system engagement with our environment. And then we give those patterns meaning, which is often distorted. So a lot of the times when people come and they share a problem, but it's really only a symptom. The problem they seeing or the problem they aware of, it's only a symptom of that underlying subconscious pattern. And so in one-on-one work, I see what we can't see individually because we then build walls to protect ourselves from these distortions. And I guide the transformation from the perspective of my intuitive expertise that I blend with applied neuroscience. But what I also came to realize in this work is that people often fail to integrate the biggest breakthroughs that may happen, whether it's in a therapy room, whether it's in a meditation, whether it's when someone's rock climbing or surfing. We all have these big aha moments, realizations about how we can move forward or who we are not or who we are. And the reason that I found that people can't integrate these realizations and live them is because they don't understand how to work with their subconscious. And so part of this work is helping them understand this subconscious wiring that's driving the psyche, that's driving these behaviors, so they can start working with it in everyday life.
There's a phrase in that neuroscience world called like the shadow, right? That's or retracement. So you may have, I can be coming to work with you and we're dealing through some stuff. Maybe it's my finances and I have these financial subconscious neural pathways that always cause me to gain money and lose money. That was what I identified as, right? But then as we're working and things, and I may be applying the things that we're discussing, and I'm doing the deep work to create a new neural pathway, a new way of thinking. Sometimes we get rocked to sleep to think that the old shadow no longer exists because we have this new way of thinking, and people crash, and then they think that the thing doesn't work. What do you say to someone who may have gone through a place where the shadow rears its head, or they retrace way back and they, instead of reverting back to the tools, they run deeper into the hole?
Yeah. And you said something important there too. You said when we think we have this new way of thinking, and then the shadow comes back up again. And, I feel like the word shadow itself scares people from doing this deeper work. And so,
Ooh, right?
it's very true. And so in my book and when I work with clients, I give it a different name because what it really is, it's a protector. Because all of our
Yes.
limiting patterns were born out of a need to survive, whether it looks now as codependency or the need to control situations around ourselves, or maybe the inability to hold on onto stable finances. All of these beliefs came through the nervous system's activation, and then we gave them some sort of meaning, or we mirrored them. We learned them from our parents, and because we learned them from the gods, from the people that our life depended on, we believe that this is the safest way of doing things. And so when we start understanding that these shadows are actually just neurological or physiological protectors that reside at the level of the nervous system and therefore subconscious, and we learn how to work with them rather than against them, as so many people do with logic and willpower. Oh, I failed. I wasn't disciplined enough. I'm going to push through this. Then they will start to lose their control. It's like the subconscious patterns, that nervous system conditioning starts to realize that we are now safe and we can change the way we live. We can change things.
I want to dive deeper into that because, like, I teach mindfulness and yoga, and in disenfranchised areas or areas that lack certain resources. So we have the compounded negative interest, right? The negative bias, where the diet may be bad, the music that they listen to, and then no one is really coming in saying, hey, you can actually transform your mindset, you can transform your diet, but everything starts with the conditioning, right? And then being consistent. So we have all of these things going on top of the inherited negative bias, right? That just happens from being human. I said all that to say, when we talk about the subconscious mind protecting us, that fear is actually, or anxiety is actually a protective mechanism, because subconscious mind just wants to really please you. My book Awakening I Am, I talk about, which just was published, we talk about how the subconscious mind is the first supercomputer, and the prompts that has been the large language model input all our lives, right? We have these prompts in the subconscious mind saying, oh, what are you doing? We never did it this way before. So it brings up these feelings that causes us to get the nervousness in the belly, or the fluttering of the heart, or the pattern recognition of last time I tried a business venture, I failed, and all of these things. And it's not really to harm us, it's to protect us, because it doesn't want us to be sad again. It doesn't want us to go through another breakup. So we just loop our way out of the next relationship. What are some of the tools that you start to arm people with, whether it's through your writings or through your one-on-ones, to help them to understand that we're always going to have these things living with us. We just need to embrace them, but don't let it be the landlord. Give it its rightful place as renters in our mind.
Yeah, and that's why I put together the framework that I work with, which is called Grace Over Grit. Okay, because I was seeing that so many people are just trying to grit their way through these subconscious limitations, and they actually end up pushing the nervous system and therefore the subconscious deeper into this protection, where maybe that pattern they're working on is gonna be dormant for a minute because we just fought it, and so it's gonna go into hiding. But then on the next opportunity it will come up again. And so one of the things that I find important for people to understand is that they don't always have to live with us, because we can truly overcome them. But it's a journey. Okay, and so it looks like initially you may be overcome by whatever it is. You withdraw in a relationship where there is a conflict, or you lash out in defense. You self-sabotage your promotion because you deep down somewhere, even though consciously you want the promotion, deep down at the subconscious level, there's a part of you that is afraid of what that would entail. And so we can overcome these patterns, and initially they will speak to us more loud, more pronounced. And as we start to work with them, then that volume of the subconscious will start to dim. And so in my framework, I put a huge emphasis on mastering the nervous system, because the nervous system is really the foundation of our psyche and our behavior. The state of our nervous system is really what determines how we feel, what we think it's possible, how open and receptive we are to the opportunities that are all around us all the time.
I've been doing a huge thing like around self-talk. I grew up in the war against drugs time. Hip hop was fresh. I grew up in what they call the projects. I don't know what the project is, but it's still working on. They're still working on that project. I'm 50 years old, right? And the project didn't seem to do much success. And we had all of these things, and the rhythms, the music that we listened to on a repetitive basis, and the school and the conversations that we had were all driving us to have these conversations with ourselves that were not kind. And I started preaching when I was 24 years old. And I'm not sitting on your couch, I'm just giving you a base scenario. I started preaching when I was 24 years old, and even though I had these new religious tracks playing, the religious tracks was also looking externally for help. We go in, we're looking, oh, God help me, and I need the prayer life. Everything that we was doing was looking without. But when I got into yoga, mindfulness, meditation, I saw that prayer has a place. Even religious context has its place. but the real work comes from within. How important is how we talk to ourselves and in the transformation of our subconscious? Not just when we're consciously up, but even before we go to bed, and what do we do when we wake up in the morning to help us to rev that day up?
It's really important how we talk to ourselves. It's part of the work that we're doing from within, although it seems like it's coming from the external vibration of our voice, right? So we are doing that work. So it's very, very important. But I find if we only focus on improving our thoughts and our mindset and the way we talk to ourselves, we are still just working at the superficial level of those deeper programs. And it's going to be very difficult for some people to start changing how they talk to themselves if their nervous system is dry, because the nervous system is what drives how we feel. And therefore, then it drives how we think. And so then I am trying to, like, if I'm just trying to focus on how I talk to myself, it's going to be much harder than if I, at the same time, learn how to work with my nervous system so I can start to silence these physiological, neurobiological reactions that arise because something that I'm not even consciously aware of just triggered my system.
So, what are some of the things? All right, we got the whole self-talk, and that's just a part of a whole. But what are some of the things that one could do for nervous system work?
Yeah.
And isolate and combine the A and the B.
Yeah. And so you mentioned yoga and meditation, and those are yoga really helped me. In my 20s, I got on a mat and I didn't get off for 15 years, and I didn't understand why I needed the practice. And I'll look back, and it was regulating my nervous system. And I practiced regularly every single day I was on a mat. So unconsciously, intuitively, I knew that this is good for my nervous system. What happens with yoga in Western society is that unfortunately we fragment that too, like we fragment all the other approaches to healing. And this is again why the Grace Over Grit is put together as a holistic approach. And people focus on asana, that physical posture mainly. Okay, and so yoga is amazing. If listeners out there are already practicing, I encourage them to go and explore different styles, because we can get into a place where we use yoga as an escape too, especially when we go to these power yoga classes and we use grit in yoga. And so go and explore different modalities, especially the slower, more self-reflective styles like yin. Meditation is wonderful, mindfulness is wonderful. At the beginning, these practices are going to be a little difficult, because when the body is full of unresolved survival energy from our early life, sitting down in silence is going to be difficult and the mind will be chaotic. And so just knowing and understanding that, I hear people say, I've tried meditation and it's not for me. Your body is just not ready, okay? Give yourself the grace of maybe sitting only for 2 minutes. Maybe first you sit with binary beats, some calming, relaxing music, and you just focus on your breathing. We have this culture in which we believe that we have to do everything in a big way. And so small steps. And the other things that I emphasize and really highlight in the program is awareness is step number 1, right? Like, become aware of your behavioral patterns and understand how the nervous system actually works. And the nervous system works in two basic modes. Thriving, I am open, I'm relaxed, I'm connected, I see possibilities. Or surviving, which is the fight and flight or the freeze. And so if you learn to understand, and again, this is without self-criticism, because this is your nervous system just trying to protect you, where your nervous system has the tendency to take you. Is it to this argumentative, defensive state? Are you always on? Are you unable to switch off from work and relax? Or is it into this numbness, this hopelessness, what's the point kind of place? And then you just observe that. And by just observing it, instead of criticizing it, the nervous system already starts to be able to breathe. Like, oh, okay, I'm not being judged anymore. And then number 2, we start the regulation practices like yoga, meditation, breathing, simple exercise of deep diaphragmatic or belly breathing, 5 minutes, 2 minutes initially. It's going to help. And you mentioned something important earlier. You said consistency. And I find that a lot of people have this idea of, well, I didn't have time, I didn't have my 10 minutes to practice today, so I didn't do it. And I'm like, well, you could have done 2 minutes or even 1 minute, because if you show up for your nervous system every single day, no matter if it's 30 seconds or 15 minutes, you are installing regulation and safety. And so there's other nervous system regulation practices that people can look up online, from breathing to movement, a lot of practices out there. And then the last step, I know you have a question, I want to finish the last
No,
step,
no, go ahead.
is learning to understand that activation that happens in the system when we are triggered needs to be felt. And it cannot be felt if our nervous system has not been looked after, if we have not been regulating it daily, because it's going to feel really overwhelming. Okay, there is a beautiful rule called the 90-second rule by a neuroscientist, Jill Butler Taylor, where she mapped how long does it actually take for the life cycle of an emotion, which is that physiological trigger of the subconscious program being awakened. How long does it last? It lasts about 90 seconds. So if I can cultivate enough regulation at the level of my nervous system, because I'm practicing every day a little bit, and if I can cultivate enough awareness of the fact that physiological activation is just a protector, it's not a shadow that's going to try to scare me off and eat me, then I can get to a place where when I feel that activation, I can sit with it. And I can sit with it in a way that lets the nervous system know, oh, the danger is over, I can process this.
It kind of get back to us tapping into a portion of us that has been numb with technology and fast paced and culture. The old archaic self was driven from the solar, was driven from our instincts. We kind of numbed our instincts to hunt, to gather, to feel, to embrace where dangers come in, and all of these things now are fused together because although we've got faster and we have built technology and bigger buildings, we kind of move man away from the true I amness, which is within. Your last thought, besides those things, nervous system things that we should be doing, where should we start? If somebody's listening and they're saying, this seems so like it's so overwhelming, what would you say?
I feel like the most simple way to, not simple, but the most important, is to start realizing that we have to work with the body. That, like, I like how you said it, the I amness. Because the mind has gathered and created all sorts of stories about who we are that are actually ultimately limiting as much as they helped us survive initially. And so cultivating this connection to our body is a huge step. And this is why the ancient practice of yoga is so effective. This is why somatic practices are so effective, because they invite us into the body. This is why there's this growing field of research around plant medicine, the psychedelics, because it brings us into the body. And so the first step is just getting curious about what it is like for me if I start befriending my body, if I start spending a little bit more time in my body than in my head. And that happens through those practices we already mentioned: yoga, breathing.
I know I said that last question, but you just posed something, and we can end with that. The psychedelics, it gets such a bad rap because if not dosed properly, it can cause problems. All right, we're not talking about buying psychedelics from the guy on the corner. Let's talk about some of the breakthroughs that we have been seeing in proper psychedelic dosage for people who may suffer from the monkey brain, ADHD, whatever it is that not just those things, but anxiety and all the breakthroughs that we see that are happening scientifically with the proper dosage and administration of psychedelics. And because this is going to be the last question, so as we do, how do we regulate to make sure that the bad actors don't start to do things that we've seen in the opioid era, which we're still living through?
Yeah, and I do believe that plant medicine is not addictive. There is a codependency that sometimes develops because people find that, well, mainly from what I'm seeing is that people don't integrate their experience. They go and they have a journey, they have an insight, and then they go back to work. And that experience kind of just becomes a memory of the past. And so you mentioned two major important things when we work with plant medicine, and that is the right dosage, of course, so working with a professional, but also preparation and integration. And so that preparation, again, I'm going to bring it back to that nervous system, because that's where our capacity to hold all these shadows, all these protectors comes from. And so preparation through understanding what I'm about to experience, but also through preparing my body, cultivating that capacity to hold that experience, and then working with someone that can help you integrate that experience. And so, it's not a lot of people mentioning the opioid problem we had do still use it as a magic pill. They'll go and do plant medicine and think, I let it unfold. But it should be an ongoing process. You do plant medicine after you prepare it, and then the longest and the most important work actually comes after, where you integrate the experience.
Thank you. There you have it, everybody. I told you we sit you at the feet of the masters, and we have conversations to help you, purposeful to help you evolve your life. We like to lead with value, and your value to us is that you hit like, share, and subscribe. Your likes, your shares, your subscriptions help these conversations get into the ears of people that need to hear it. Somebody needs to hear what can help them optimize their IMs. Also, we don't ask you for Cash App, Venmos, or any of those things, donations. But what we do ask is something that is very simple, that you support our guests. They've led with value, led with their expertise, but they have an ecosystem. They have things that they share, books and podcasts and things that are all, Dr. Alena's information is all in the description. Follow her on her social platforms. Engage. Let her know that you heard her here on this particular platform, so that she can feel good about the work that she's doing as a podcaster and sharing her information as she leads with value. And finally, Awakening I Am, our first book, is here. The link to the audio book is in the description. The link to the physical book, if you're not an audio person and you want the physical book, is in the description. And if you are a small business owner and you want to integrate, we do have Victory Builders, which is an all-inclusive platform for people like myself who are just trying to figure out how to survive in a digital platform. We've figured it out for you, so you don't have to go at it by yourself. It comes with full support from our team. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. Don't walk making excuses. Don't walk with your head down. Spend some time listening to your nervous system as one that is looking on the balcony, watching how you interact. What triggers you? What helps the mind to relax? What helps the mind to run away? And once you start to understanding, then you can start to work. Walk in victory. Peace.